I was once a devoted student at a Zen monastery nestled high in the mountains, far from the distractions of the world below. I had arrived there as a young man, betrayed by someone I once called brother. In that monastery, under the watchful eye of Master Enso, I began to rebuild myself. Each morning, I would rise before the sun, sweep the temple floors, and sit in silence with the others. Slowly, the chaos in my mind began to quiet. Though the wound in my heart, inflicted years ago, remained untouched, I had once confided in a man I trusted deeply. We had grown up together in the same village, shared food and dreams, laughed until the stars blinked awake. One day, when I was at my lowest, he used what I had told him in confidence to humiliate me publicly, turning others against me. That betrayal festered like rot inside me. Even after years had passed, and I had chosen the path of the Dharma, I could not forget his eyes as he watched me fall. Master Enso never asked about my past. He only watched, observed, and when the time was right, offered lessons that had no explanation but always struck deep. One winter morning, snow still clinging to the pine branches, he approached me in the meditation hall and said, "Today, you will follow me." He led me silently through the woods behind the monastery until we reached a clearing where a single large stone sat half buried in the snow. "Lift this stone," he said. I tried. It was heavier than it looked and cold. My fingers slipped. I strained, groaned, but could not move it. He watched me without expression. "Try again." I did, with all the strength in my body, until sweat ran down my back and my arms trembled. Still, the stone would not budge. Finally, Master Enso knelt beside me. He placed his hand on the stone, not to lift it, but simply to touch it. "This stone," he said, "is like the betrayal you carry. You have tried to lift it with force, to push it away with effort, but it is not effort that will move it." Sat there, breathing hard, confused. "You do not move the stone," he continued, "by fighting it. You move it by understanding it." I stared at the rock, frost forming around its edges. But how do I understand something so cruel? He looked at me then with the gentlest eyes I had ever seen. By seeing that it too was once soft, I didn't understand then, not fully. But he left me there, with the snow beginning to fall again, and I sat beside the stone for hours, watching its stillness. I remembered my old friend's face, not the face of the man who betrayed me, but the boy who once shared his only rice cake with me when we were hungry. I remembered the time he cried when his mother died, and how I held his hand that night. In the silence of the forest, something began to melt inside me. Not forgiveness, not forgiveness yet, but a seed of recognition. The man who betrayed me was not just my enemy. He was also a human, broken and scared, just as I had been. Days passed. I returned to the stone again and again, sometimes in sun. Each time I sat with it, I saw something new. I began to understand that the betrayal had shaped me, not only in pain, but in strength. If he hadn't broken my trust, I might never have left my village. I might never have climbed this mountain. I might never have discovered silence. One evening, I found Master Enzo in the garden, trimming dead leaves from the plum trees. I think I'm beginning to understand the stone, I said. He smiled without looking up. Then it is no longer heavy. He was right. That winter, the pain that had once haunted me like a shadow began to loosen its grip. I no longer dreamed of revenge. I no longer spoke his name with bitterness. The wound was still there, but it no longer bled. It had become part of the path beneath my feet, something I walked on, not something that dragged me down. In the years that followed, I saw many others come to the monastery with similar stories. Faces twisted in hurt, eyes full of betrayal, and I told them about the stone. Some cried, some laughed, some sat in silence, but all of them began to see, just as I had, that healing does not begin with forgetting. It begins with understanding. And now, as I sit beneath the same plum tree, much older, much quieter, I think of him, my old friend. I do not know where he is or what became of him, but I send him thoughts of peace, because he gave me the wound that led me here. And for that, strangely, I am grateful. I remember the night I first heard the story of Kisa Gautami. The wind outside the monastery whispered like a mourning widow, and the candles flickered as if the walls themselves were weeping. I was still, young then new to the path, new to the silence, and still carrying the unbearable weight of my mother's death. She had died suddenly, without warning. One day she was making tea, and the next she was gone. Her hands cold, her breath vanished like mist. I had not known how to grieve. I had screamed into the night. I had cursed the sky. I had begged the gods, if there were any, to take me to. And when they did not answer, I closed my heart like a fist. Master Enzo found me sitting alone beneath the Bodhi tree, weeks after I arrived at the monastery. He didn't ask why I wept in silence. Instead, he sat beside me and spoke of Kisa. Gautami, she had once been a radiant woman, full of life and laughter. But her joy ended the day her only child died. I imagined her cradling the tiny body, pressing her cheek to cold skin, refusing to believe what the world had already accepted. She carried the child through the streets, begging anyone who would listen to help bring him back. "Please," she said to her neighbors, "please give me medicine. Please save him." But no one could. Death had already sealed its doors when she reached the Buddha. There was something wild in her eyes: desperation, grief, madness, and yet the Buddha did not turn her away. "Bring me a mustard seed," he told her gently, "from a household where no one has died." Hope sparked in her like fire. She raced through the village, knocking on every door. But in every home, she found the same answer. "Yes, I have mustard seeds," they said, "but my father died last year. My sister died as a child. My husband passed away in the spring." Again and again, the answer came. Every family had lost someone. As Master Enso told the story, I felt something shifting in me. Kisa Gatami's feet grew weary. Her shoulders, once straight with purpose, sagged beneath the weight of truth. At last, she sat beside the road, her child still in her arms, but now her eyes saw differently. She saw that her grief was not unique. Her pain was not a curse upon her alone. She returned to the Buddha, not with mustard seeds, but with understanding, and she said, "I could not find a single house untouched by death." The Buddha looked at her with infinite compassion and said, "Now you see, Gautami, life is woven with death. To be born is to walk toward loss. But knowing this is the beginning of wisdom." As Master Enso finished the story, I remained silent. My tears came slowly, not with the violence of before, but like a quiet stream finally finding its way home in the days that followed. I sat with my grief instead of running from it. I watched it, breathed with it, allowed it to speak. It told me of love deep, love that could not exist without the ache of loss. I realized my pain was proof that I had loved my mother fiercely, and that love did not vanish with her body. It lived in my breath, in my memory. In the silence between the bells ringing, for the first time, I began to feel gratitude, not for the pain, but for what it revealed. I learned, too, that grief is not a straight path. Some days, I would wake with peace in my chest. Other days, the sorrow would wash over me again. But I stopped fighting the tide. I let it come, and I let it go. Years later, when I began teaching younger monks, one of them came to me with hollow eyes. He had lost his sister, he said, and could not eat, could not sleep, could not breathe without the ache. I sat him down beneath the Bodhi tree, and I told him about Kisa Gatami. He didn't speak for a long time after that, but the next morning he swept the temple floor with quiet hands, his shoulders no longer trembling. That was enough now. Whenever someone says, "My grief is too much. I cannot bear it," I do not offer empty comfort. I simply tell them this: you are not alone. Others have walked this path before you, and the Buddha walks with you still. Grief, I have learned, is not a punishment. It is a sacred reminder that something once mattered deeply. And though the world may never be the same, something new grows in its place: compassion, empathy, wisdom. Just like Kisa Gatami. I did not find a mustard seed untouched by sorrow, but I found peace in knowing that I did not suffer alone. And in that knowing, I found a strength I never imagined was mine. There was a time when the storm inside me was louder than any thunder in the sky. I would sit in the meditation hall, eyes closed, back straight, hands resting gently on my lap, just as I had been taught. From the outside, I looked calm, still, like a pond untouched by wind, but inside, there was chaos. Thoughts spun like dry leaves in a whirlwind: memories, regrets, fears, the echo of voices long gone. My breath came shallow, my legs ached, and my mind refused to be silent. Each time I tried to bring it back to the breath, it slipped away like water through open fingers. I once believed meditation would be instant peace, a shortcut to bliss. I thought if I sat long enough, in enough silence, the pain would dissolve. But I was wrong. At first, meditation did not calm me, expose me. It forced me to sit face to face with every part of myself I had tried to avoid. One night, during a particularly restless session, I opened my eyes and found Master Enzo watching me from across the hall. He said nothing, just gave a slow nod as if to say, "Keep going." Later that evening, after the others had gone to sleep, I found him in the garden, tending to the moonflowers. He didn't look up when I approached. "Why is it," I asked quietly, "that the more I sit, the louder everything becomes?" He smiled gently. "Because only in silence do we begin to hear what was always there." That answer stayed with me. I realized I had not brought the storm into meditation. The storm had always been inside me. Meditation didn't create the chaos, it revealed it. So I kept sitting, day after day, night after night, sometimes 4 minutes, sometimes for hours. I sat through aching knees, through hunger, through tears that came without warning. I sat through memories I thought I had buried, through shame, through longing, through numbness, and slowly something began to shift. One morning, as the sun rose over the eastern ridge, I sat beneath the plum tree. The wind moved gently through the branches, and I followed my breath, not without distraction, but with patience. A thought came, then another, but I didn't fight them. I didn't cling. I simply watched them rise and fall, like clouds drifting through the sky. In that moment, I felt something I had never known before. Stillness. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with flashing lights or sacred visions. It was soft, subtle, but unmistakable. The storm was still the rich wind, far off in the distance, but I was no longer inside it. I was the witness now, the observer. And in that witnessing, I discovered a quiet strength I had never known. People think strength is in action, in movement, in doing. But I learned that real strength lies in stillness. The kind of strength that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't react, the kind that stands unmoved even as the world trembles. Over time, I understood what Master Enso meant when he said, "The mountain does not fear the wind. The wind may howl, the rain may fall, but the mountain remains." And I began to become that mountain. When fear visited me, fear of the future, fear of failure, fear of being alone, did not try to banish it. I welcomed it. I bowed to it, thought. And in doing so, I found it had less power over me. When grief returned, as it always does, I did not run. I made space for it beside me, like an old friend who had come to share tea. I did not feed it, but I did not ignore it. I simply breathed and allowed it to pass. This, I discovered, is the heart of meditation. Not escape, but intimacy. Not silence as a hiding place, but silence as a mirror. And in that mirror, I met myself, not the version shaped by stories or pain, but the one beneath it all. The part of me that was never touched by betrayal, never broken by grief, never shaken by fear, pure, quiet, unmoving. Some days, the storm still returns. I still feel its gusts, its temptations to react, to run, to fight. But now, I meet it with stillness. I return to the breath, to the body, to the now. And in that return, I find my center again. I once thought meditation was a practice. Now, I understand it is a homecoming, and in that home, no storm can uproot me. It was during the rainy season retreat that I first heard the parable of the two monks. The clouds had swallowed the sun for days, and the ground beneath the monastery had turned to thick, sticky mud. The air was heavy with a scent of damp earth and moss. Everything felt slow, weighted, even time. I was carrying something then, a memory, a resentment, a story I had told myself so many times that it had become part of my identity. Someone I once loved had left without a word, vanished from my life as if I never mattered. Years had passed, but the bitterness remained. I wore it like armor, thinking it protected me, but in truth, it was a prison. That evening, after a long period of meditation, Master Enso gathered us in the hall and began to speak. He rarely told stories, and when he did, his voice carried the weight of silence between every word. Two monks, he began, were traveling together on a long journey. As they walked along a muddy path, they came upon a woman standing at the edge of a river. The water was high from recent rains, and she was afraid to cross. She wore fine clothes, not meant for such terrain. Without hesitation, the older monk stepped forward. He offered to carry her. She agreed, and he lifted her onto his back and waded across the river. Once on the other side, he gently set her down. She bowed slightly and, without a word, walked away. The younger monk remained silent as they continued their journey, but his face was tight and his steps heavy. Hours passed in silence. Finally, he could no longer contain himself. "I did. You carry that woman?" he asked. "We are monks. We are not to touch women, let alone carry them." The older monk paused. He looked at his companion and said calmly, "I put her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" Master Enso let the silence that followed linger like a bell's final echo. I remember sitting there, stunned. Something inside me shifted, not suddenly, but deeply. I had been carrying my own burden long after the moment had passed. Younger monk, I clung to a memory, replayed it endlessly, allowed it to color everything. I had convinced myself that I was preserving truth or protecting myself. But in reality, I was simply refusing to let go. That night, I went to the river beyond the monastery. The rain had stopped, and the moonlight shimmered on the moving water. I sat on a flat stone and let my legs dangle just above the surface. I spoke aloud, not to anyone, but to the part of me that still held on. "I release you," I whispered. "Not because you deserve it. Not because what you did was right, but because I can no longer carry this weight." My voice trembled. My chest ached. But something inside me softened. Letting go is not forgetting. It is not denial. It is the courage to stop reliving a wound. It is the act of releasing the story that binds you to pain. I had thought holding on made me strong, but it only made me tired in the days that followed. I began to notice how much I clung to not just the past, but my own expectations, my fears, even my image of who I thought I was supposed to be. Each time I recognized one, I asked myself, is this something I still need to carry? Sometimes the answer was yes. Often it was no. I started small. I let go of the idea that I had to be perfect in my practice. I let go of the need to always have the last word. I let go of the silent judgment I held toward those who who didn't understand me, and gradually, I began to feel lighter. There's a strange paradox in letting go. Feels like loss at first, like surrender. But what I discovered was that every release made space for something new. Where bitterness had lived, now came compassion. Where judgment had clung, now came curiosity. And where sorrow had built its home, now there was room for peace. Years later, I shared the story of the two monks with a traveler who came seeking solace. He had been betrayed by someone close to him, and the pain still wrapped around him like a shadow. When I finished the parable, he asked, "But what if I'm not ready to put her down?" I smiled gently. "Then carry her, but carry her consciously. Know that you are holding on, and when the weight becomes too much, you'll know what to do." He looked at me, and something in his eyes softened, the way mine once had. We all carry something too long. The question is not whether we will, because we will, but whether we'll have the courage to set it down when the time comes. The river keeps flowing. It doesn't cling to what it touches, and neither must we. There was a time I believed strength meant never showing pain, never bending, never breaking. I wore my discipline like armor, held my silence like a shield. I thought if I could simply endure, if I could outlast the storm, I would be invincible. But I was wrong. True strength, I would later learn, does not harden. It softens. It doesn't close its heart, it opens it. It began with a question, "Master," and so asked me one early morning, just after dawn. I had been up before the bell, meditating under the old cedar tree, struggling with a restlessness I could not name. He stood behind me in silence for some time before speaking. "Tell me," he asked gently, "when you see someone in pain, what do you feel?" I answered without hesitation, "Compassion, Master. I feel their suffering as if it were my own." He nodded slowly, then looked at me with steady eyes. "And when you see yourself in pain, what do you feel?" I was silent. He didn't press. He simply bowed and walked away, leaving his question ringing louder than any temple bell. That question haunted me. I realized that while I could offer kindness to others, I held none for myself. I judged my own pain. I scolded myself for being weak, for feeling too much, for not being enlightened enough to let go. In everyone else's wounds, I saw humanity. In mine, I saw failure. That day, something shifted in me. I began to sit with myself, not as a warrior preparing for battle, but as a friend returning after a long absence. I watched the same old memories arise, the betrayals, the losses, the regrets. But now, instead of resisting them, I greeted them with tenderness. One memory stood out more than the rest. The day my younger sister died. We were children then, and I was supposed to be watching her. I looked away for only a moment, and when I turned back, she was gone. The river had taken her. No one ever said it was my fault, but I carried that guilt like a burning coal for years. I buried it deep, believing I had no right to grieve. One night in meditation, that memory came again, but this time I didn't turn away. I saw myself, a frightened boy, soaked with river water, screaming her name into the trees, and something within me broke open. Not with anger, but with love. I reached out in my mind and placed my hand on that boy's shoulder. I told him what no one had ever told me. It wasn't your fault, and even if it was, you still deserve kindness. That moment was the beginning of my healing. I had mistaken punishment for justice. I had thought strength meant carrying pain until it crushed me. But the truth is, real strength begins the moment we offer compassion to the most broken parts of ourselves. When we stop trying to erase the past and instead learn to hold it gently, compassion, I discovered, is not pity. It is presence. It is the quiet willingness to sit beside someone, even if that someone is yourself, and say, I see you. I'm here. And you don't have to go through this alone. Over time, that inner flame of compassion grew. Didn't flare up like a torch. It glowed steadily, like an oil lamp protected from the wind. It warmed the coldest corners of my soul. It softened my judgments. It opened my heart in ways I never thought possible. I began to see others differently. To Dot, there was a monk at our monastery who had always irritated me. He was loud when silence was needed, clumsy when care was required. I avoided him when I could. But one morning, I saw him sitting alone, weeping quietly behind the prayer hall. I don't know what moved me, but I sat beside him at twos. I just placed my hand on the ground near his. After a long silence, he whispered, I miss my mother. That was all he said. That was all he needed to say. I had never asked what burdens he carried. I had only seen his surface. But in that moment, I realized that every person we meet is carrying something invisible. And sometimes, the kindest thing we can do is simply be present with them. That is compassion. That is strength. Now, when storms come, and they still, do I no longer brace myself with clenched fists? I open my palms. I light the flame within me, and I let it guide me through. It has never failed me. There is a strength that comes from silence. There is a strength that comes from solitude. But the greatest strength I've ever known came from the simple act of turning inward and saying, I will not abandon you. Not to the world, not to others, not even to myself. This is how I learned to walk the path, not with force, but with grace. Not with resistance, but with compassion. And now, when I look into the eyes of another, whether they are angry, afraid, joyful, or lost, I search for that same flame, because I know it's there, somewhere, flickering quietly behind their pain, just waiting for someone to notice, just waiting to be loved back into light.